Ladies and gentlemen, I'm speaking loud because these guys have the speakers. But today we're actually going on a historical journey. Two gentlemen who have spent a long life, a lifetime of studying the Bible and ancient Mediterranean religion, really. Both of you have journeyed in these lands. You've seen them on the ground. And I, as a curious onlooker who's an enthusiast, say, it's more than just what's the text say, what's the story say, what's the theology. It's like, who are these guys? Who are these humans right here, right now? Why are you so passionate after all this time? There's got to be a background. So we need to know about Dr. James Tabor and Dr. John Dominic Crossan, historical figures in biblical scholarship, New Testament, and ancient religion. And so with that being said, I'm a fly on the wall today. If I chime in, it's necessary. Apart from that, I want to hear what both these gentlemen say. So thank you for joining me today. I'm really honored.
It's an honor. We're glad to be with you. Yeah. Be with you, to be with my friend Don. And look, it's just a conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. Scholars almost never do this.
This is like,
they're always on panels, debates. As I joke with Don before, what's the meaning of baptism for the dead in 1 Corinthians? Let's do an hour on that. No.
That's the weird stuff I get into. But then there's a point where I stop and I go, who is James Tabor? Who is Dom? And he likes to be called Dom. So we need to find out who they are today, and you're going to find out yourself. And I figure, how do we want to do this? Do we want to start with seniors first here and say Dom is...
We're both pretty old. Don is older than him.
So we'll start with Don's.
If it's age before beauty.
I think it's worth starting with background faith, because I imagine we were young. All of us were young. So maybe tell us how you got into the faith. And then how did you become such a juggernaut in the field of Bible scholarship and part of a Jesus seminar and all that? Let's lead up to that. But what we might do is first start with faith, then we'll come to you for faith, and we'll balance it out before we get to scholarship. Then we'll go to you for scholarship. Okay. All right, have some fun.
But then for fun, let me begin with my name. John Dominic Crossan. Why can't I have a civilized name like John D. Crossan? Why has it to be John Dominic Crossan? Story. In 1950, I entered the Roman Catholic religious monastery, and in the monastery, as in the Bible, when you come in, they change your name. They wipe out your past, so I was John Crossan. That's still on my passports, driving license, TSA, all that stuff. I was in Donegal, so I was Sean O'Crossan, which sounds nicer. Anyway, John Crossan. Into the monastery, they say, John Crossan is gone. Brother Dominic has arrived. They gave me that name. I didn't choose it. So 19 years later, I suddenly realized celibacy is vastly overrated. I decided to leave the monastery, but I wanted to take everything with that exception, celibacy, with me. So I stuck Dominic in the middle. It has no legal standing. So I have to keep John there for the government.
Yeah.
And Dominic's there for God, and they're not in speaking terms at the moment.
Wow.
So there's no confusion. But anyone who knows me as Dom.
Right.
Because that's kind of the identity I had for 19 years after I left the monastery.
So that's the explanation. Real quick question on that before we move to James. James is going to have a different story here. Stay tuned. Why the heck go into a monastery with ascetic thought of like, hey, who in their right mind, right, would say, hey, I'm going and I'm not doing anything with the girls. I'm not gonna.
All right. Now, history rules. So we are in Ireland in 1945 to 50. I'm in a classical boarding school, 5 years of Greek, 5 years of Latin. Not because I was particularly intelligent, but the small towns of Ireland couldn't have a high school. So they had a central school, not an elite 40 school, nothing like that, just a necessity of economics. So if you lived in that town, you were a day boy because there was a convent down the road for the day girls. And if you were 40 miles away like we were, you were a boarder. That's the way life was. So I went into that. Now, why did I go into the monastery? It had nothing, please, to do with piety or holiness. I thought in the wilds of Donegal, far north of Donegal, in the year 1950, when I was 16, I thought this was the greatest adventure I could imagine. I adored my father. He was a bank manager. Boring. I was in and out of the bank all the time on the weekends when, it was closed. It didn't interest me. It was whatever. But a monastery in another country, by the way, not in small little Ireland, but either in Louvain or Rome or America. The first Americans I ever saw was a priest who came recruiting into our boarding school. It was adventure. Honestly, it still is, by the way.
Yeah.
I thought God had the best game in town. Still do. Still do. Through all these years, it's changed, but yeah, it was adventure.
So technically, just to wrap that bow, is that you realized there was value there, but you didn't need the whole package they were selling you in order to value.
Well, that is its discrimination I never made. The package came as an adventure to me. The whole package. It meant you were going to have to go to study to be a priest. You'd either go to the Servite was the order I was entering. That's a 13th century order. You either went to Louvain, which was their major, or to Rome, or to America, which is what we did 1 year later, under the Queen Mary, which was quite an adventure. So all of this sounded like wrapped up in a package. I really don't mind to say, well, I just did it for adventure and not for religion. I grew up in Ireland where the wallpaper was Catholicism of the country. You took it for granted.
That's a good way to put it.
I never said to myself, I wonder if I should be a Catholic.
It was the oxygen you breathed.
It was the oxygen I breathed. And I did know, by the way, that in Northern Ireland, of course, they were predominantly Protestants. And in Southern Ireland, which I lived most of my life, they were predominantly Catholic. Of course, I knew that. But Catholic was taken for granted. Gotcha. Yeah, we went to Mass. We didn't think, oh, Sunday we have to go. Of course you did it. That's what everyone did. So entering the monastery was the big adventure. That's the point.
Thank you. So James, you clearly have a completely different Christianity. Tell us your background, your upbringing.
So I was born in Texas, of all places, not Ireland. And my father and mother are from Texas. And I'm pretty close to almost being a war baby. So we're talking about, I was born in March 1946. Do the math, and you're going to get back to V-Day, 1945.
46.
So Dad came home, is in the military. He joined the day after Pearl Harbor. He had college already on his own, first of 11 kids to go to college. And he sent to Florida. They call it officer training school. No, yeah. Clark Gable, Jimmy Stewart were there. I was named after Jimmy Stewart.
Oh, really?
Bad. He just liked Jimmy. My real name is, you talk about your passport. Mine says Jimmy Dan Tabor. Sort of like, I'm embarrassed. Like, it's a kid's name. So I changed it when I was 12 or 13. You're kind of like Jimmy Carter is actually James Carter, our former president. So, but now my real friends, jokingly first in grad school, they go, Jimmy, come on, you need to do, And then I sort of started liking it, but everybody calls me James, basically. But Churches of Christ. Now, this is the more conservative brand of it, not the Christian church or the disciples. The distinguishing mark the public would know is no instrumental music. But what we learned as we were taught more is, well, the Eastern Catholic Church has no instrumental music. And the early church fathers condemn it because it's going to lead to what you see maybe in Pentecostal churches. Let's jazz it up and no, this is a rational faith. Alexander Campbell, Barton W. Stone, 19th century pioneers, had this dream. Let's restore primitive Christianity. Campbell was very educated. He was Scottish, Presbyterian, and he got this idea, the old idea, speak where the Bible speaks, remain silent where the Bible is silent, do Bible things in Bible ways. Let's restore the original pure Christianity. What I didn't know at the time, because I'd never heard of Judaism much, that we're talking about a movement within ancient Second Temple Judaism. I just thought you open your Bible, primarily the New Testament. You can read the Old Testament, good story is David and Goliath and all that, but it's all leading up to the new covenant. So they're very dispensational, not in the modern sense of dispensation, it's like Darby, but the idea of the law and the prophets are until John. Since that time, Jesus has come. We're in a new covenant. So they tried to be the New Testament church. And I was sort of attracted. I mean, what else did I know? And when I was 12 years old, I became an avid reader of the Bible. I'll never forget, I read Matthew. I'm going to read the New Testament. I got to Mark and I thought, I read this before. Kind of skipped through that. Hey, he's kind of repeating. It's a précis. And I got to Luke. Oh, we got some good Spirit and prodigal son and John. Actually, oddly, I wasn't that fond of John. There's something in me since. I like that historical stuff. It sounded kind of fluffier. So here's the thing. This was my conversion. I grew up in the Church of Christ. My dad's in Air Force. He rejoins the Air Force during the Korean War. They made him an offer he couldn't refuse. They wanted to he was an officer. He ended up being a colonel. And then we got stationed all over the world. So I only lived in Texas for 5 years. And then we went to England and we went to Iran for 2 years. And I lived a year in France. And so I got some of that international experience too. But on the way home from Iran, I was 16 years old. Dad was very devout. He could start talking about Jesus and his death and kind of tear up. Very devout. And I kind of embarrassed by that. I felt it, but I had a different personality. And he said, let's stop in Jerusalem on the way home. We're in the Middle East. And that trip changed my life.
You were 16.
I was 16, 1962, July, still have my passport. And little Jimmy Dan started walking the streets of Jerusalem, the whole city. This is Jordan then, before the 6 Day War.
Yeah, right.
And I asked the guide, I had that historical thing in me. I don't know where it came from. I said, now these streets, is this like in the time of Jesus? He go, no, that would tend to be 3 to 4 meters deep. Yeah. At that time, there wasn't I know Jerusalem now, I've done 30 years of archaeology. There wasn't a place you could go other than some foundation stones around the wall where you'd say, Jesus stepped here. Now, something was in me. I'll go back to when I was 10 and illustrate this. We went to Mount Vernon, George Washington's home. We were stationed at the Pentagon, Dad was. So, go to Mount Vernon. And I went with my parents, and the slave quarters really intrigued me. Oh, I was just walking in there and looking around. But I went to the back porch, and there's these concrete steps, and I thought, are those ancient or modern? So I asked the docent, were those here when George left? And he said, oh, yes, those are the original steps. I said, I'm going to sit here a while. I'm getting emotional. I sat on those steps. I put my hand on the pavement. I said, George Washington. See him up and down. These steps. It was in me.
Yeah. There's something about that.
Yeah. And even now, when I pick up a coin on the dig or the students, I dug at Cephas for 3 years with Jim Strange.
Yeah.
And when we would get down, I was very prejudiced. You're not supposed to be like this. Oh, this is Byzantine. Okay, could we go on further? I wanted Jesus.
Yeah.
Could Jesus have laid these students now? Could Jesus, Dr. Tabor, have laid these stones? Well, could. But that youth back then, I would have said, oh, if you could show me this street was first century, I would lie down on it almost. Touching that history, it's still with me. So when I came back, I was already a Christian. I was baptized when I was 10, immersed.
Wow.
For the remission of my sins. Acts 2:38, repent and be baptized in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of your sins. You don't need the church. You don't need, ecclesia. Yeah. You just need your Bible and your faith. And I just felt, well, I want to know what's really true. Like, whether it's archaeology texts, like what was he really like? And I got fired up.
That stuff got in too early. Because I was very similar. I'm going to have to go back now. I'm talking about during the Second World War, the Ireland was neutral, of course. But gasoline, petrol was on need to have, and a bank manager like my father didn't need to have. A doctor did. So our Vauxhall car was up on actually 4 Butterbosch in the garage, and we used to go for long walks on Saturday afternoon on the Naas Dublin Road. That's what we were doing. My father must have graduated from high school, I would say, around 18, so around 1922, okay? That was the time that the death pits at Ur were all in the news, and Tutankhamun had been discovered. My father was enthralled by this.
Oh,
No, this was adventure for him. This is where I started it. He told me all of these stories. Now, he wasn't telling me his Bible backgrounds or anything like that. This was kind of news, gossip, but he told it as adventure. So the first time I heard, even a second thing we used to do was learn poetry. He would recite, these are hour-long walks. He'd recite poetry.
wow.
There's not great stuff, not great poetry. If he did that, that was at school.
Limericks or just full?
No. Barrack room ballads, anything with the rhythm that went like this.
It's pleasurable.
Yeah, anything dump that I could learn. I learned Gunga Dim
Wow.
in 2 hours on the Dublin Road on the Saturday afternoon and got 6pence for it. The whole thing I could still, now in India Sunday time where I spent some of my time serving of Her Majesty the Queen of all, and then get one as a racist. But, it comes back. Now, it had nothing to do with scholarship. It really didn't. I got a sense of adventure from my father. But the first time I heard of Nineveh and all of this, a Quinquerim from Nineveh, I heard this from my father. So by the time I ran into Nineveh, by the time I walked the streets of old Nineveh, a decade later, I was already trained as you were to think history, not in scholarship.
No.
It was in there early. So if I'm thinking about Jonah and Nineveh, I'm not saying, well, now did Nineveh really exist? I know Nineveh exists, and because Jonah, I had my doubts about. So I was kind of smoothed into this. So there was no big, I don't believe. I never had biblical fundamentalism. I did have painful fundamentalism, but the Pope's over there in Rome, so who cares?
Take a moment, if you don't mind, before that, because I'd like to give you my little, and it'll take me 30 seconds.
Okay, my God.
It's not a long story. I elaborated on the channel. But what is, when you say papal fundamentalism, in my mind, I think, well, I don't care what the church says it. They're the authority. I don't give a crap. I'm following jot and tittle to what they say. Who cares if the Bible has contradictions, problems, myths, legends? That doesn't matter. It's what the Pope, it's what the bishops, it's what, the apostolics.
Yeah.
That's all that matters. And it's almost like, it's hard for someone like me who came from a different, but I'm hearing you. What is the difference?
What we're looking for is somewhere on this earth who will give me absolute security. Now, if some people think, again, from a book, it's kind of silly because you have to interpret the book. But it's far better. The Pope will tell you it. He will tell you what the book means. And if you have any doubt, he will explain it to you.
Right.
And please don't take it personally if we have to burn you at the stake if you get it wrong.
Yeah.
It's not personal.
It's really good as a whole. Yeah.
But so it's the reason I left the monastery in August of 1968. Other things were going on in Chicago.
Boy, right, history, eh? Oh, where? Yeah.
But John Paul II came out with the encyclical in plain language said that any form of birth control except rhythm or abstinence was a mortal sin. I was invited on PBS to debate with a doctor, a medical doctor. I was a theological doctor. What did I think about that? And I said, well, he's wrong. I mean, he's the Pope, but he's our Pope, but he's wrong. Like Nixon is our president, he's wrong about Vietnam. So leaders can be wrong. Pope's wrong about this. Whoo! The Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago wrote to my superiors, which is how it's done, show cause within 1 week. The date was given. It was August the 26th. Show cause within 1 week why Crossan is now to the diocese.
Oh, wow.
He couldn't toss me out because I was a member of the exempt religious order. He could tell my superior to toss me out. And my superior defended me. And then everything stopped. So this was the first year, by the way, at Catholic Theological Union, 68 to 69, 3 orders, the Passionists, the Servites, and the Franciscans, had just come together and to found the Catholic Theological Union, which got some mileage recently because of Pope Leo. So I was there the first year, and then I left. So basically, I had to leave. I left freely because they wouldn't throw me out. So I applied formally for a dispensation from Rome, politely, because that's the nice way to do it. You take vows through the church to God. I wanted out, so I'm asking out. If they had said no, I would have left.
Yeah.
I think they were probably had a rescript waiting for me, hoping I would apply, maybe. I got it immediately. Right. It was dated, maybe you have a sense of humor in the Vatican, July the 4th.
So
there's liberation.
There's a fundamental problem between both forms of fundamentalism, and that is you can't question the authority. So when you talk about scripture, the interpreter of that particular denomination, once you question that interpretation, or you cherry pick, I like that from the Bible, I don't like that from the Bible, excommunicate that guy. Or you have a difference of interpretation, and with you had a difference of interpretation of how things are ethically, and the Pope said, well, people now are.
It's not tough. Basically, what I said, look, in the long haul across the desert in the Exodus, Moses, who was the leader, and by the way, he didn't get ever to come into the promised land, but the scouts did.
Yeah.
I'm a theologian. I'm a scout. I go up ahead of the main group,
Right.
and I hear weird things, and I end up in weird houses sometimes, you know? But that's all right. Rahab will end up in the life of Jesus, in the lineage of Jesus. So I said, in effect, cardinal popes, you're leaders, but you won't get into the promised land. You may see it from the peak of Pisgah, as it were, but we're the scouts. You won't like what we tell you, by the way, because they might tell you there's trouble up ahead, but you need scouts and you need leaders.
Wow.
So that was my defense, basically. I'm a scout.
So let me tell you what happened after Jerusalem. It's very similar, but different. Obviously, we're different. But so we get back to the United States, and I tell my father, we got stationed in Illinois.
Okay.
And I'd wanted, Hemingway had taken his life in 1959. And in high school, before I went to Jerusalem, I kind of had I was going to be Hemingway. I lived in Paris the year before. I used to go to cafes and drink beer and kind of imagine what did Hemingway sit here or there. Real short stories. Yeah, called him Papa. He was on the cover of Life magazine. I still have the cover. And we get back to the States, and I tell my dad, I want to go to Abilene Christian College. He wasn't against that because it's Church of Christ.
Yeah.
And I didn't know Abraham Malherbe was there, the great New Testament scholar, Everett Ferguson, the great historian, Lemoyne Lewis. All these guys studied at Harvard with A.D. Knock. Boy, thank God I chose this kind of fundamentalist school because these Harvard guys were there. The Church of Christ put Carl Holliday, all these scholars are out there from this period. But I didn't know. And my dad, well, Jimmy, why don't you think about medical school or law school, something, what are you going to study? And I wrote him after the first semester, I said, I'm going to major in Greek, Dad. You know what parents say? And what are you going to do with that?
Exactly.
And you know what I wanted to do?
That's the business.
I wanted to scour the New Testament and see what was true. So I was on this quest.
Okay.
In my own primitive way, the quest after that trip, what do we really know and how do we know it? Mm-hmm. I've been on it ever since, and I was 17. And Dad got over that, and later he was so proud of me. I had worked in a church for a while preaching, and I gave, before Chicago, I finally went to Pepperdine and then the University of Chicago. And then I got a real dose of critical scholarship. Yeah. But I still have it's almost like I've been on this thing since 16.
Yeah.
What do we really know? And not just what's my religious faith, but what difference would it make,
So if I may, with 60 seconds here, to transition to our academic careers, because my experience, so I'm going to talk a little loud so that it picks me up on your mind. So, okay. All right. I was a young boy who had a father, military, special forces. Like he's one of the elites. We're talking to be an elite, you kind of have to be a little bit nuts. You have to be a Spartan on the front line, kind of kicking indoors, dropping out of helicopters, airplanes, and, badass. And so dad would also have alcohol problems. And so I had an alcoholic family with a trauma of dad kind of was a werewolf. And then the next day he's like, there's nobody greater. You know what I mean? Like he's my hero. He's the greatest.
You met your dad, yeah.
Greatest human being on planet Earth. Of course, I'm a little biased, but he would also have the dark side. And the trauma there was real. I ended up going through years of addiction. That's ahead. But I went to church as a private school because we had some pretty bad schools where we lived. Mom sent us to private school, Christian school, Cornerstone Christian Academy.
Oh,
and there was a moment when they had a sermon where we talked about lies.
Lies. Okay.
Yeah. And if you tell a lie, you got to lie about the lie. So he gave this example that just totally gave me like the symptoms, like it was like going to the doctor and they're like, yeah, you got this problem, this problem, this problem. You're like, I didn't even know I had all these problems, but we have a remedy. But the way that it was packaged was there's a father. There's a father who loves you and he'll never let you down.
Okay.
Unconditional. That message drew me down to that altar that day and I accepted it. And it was like
So it wasn't Jesus Christ as much dying for your sins?
Yeah, no, well, that part of it. Yeah. That was the love. The one that loved me. Yeah, he loved me so much that he...
John 3:16.
Yeah, it's the same. It's that. And it's evangelical, your type of Christianity. And I accepted, and I had an absolute euphoric change. And it gave me in moments of trial and trouble, there was a moment I can go inside and go, it's okay. You're a child of the Most High. You have these things, right? So I said all that. Sorry, this went a little longer than I thought it would. But the point is, years later, I'm at school, public school. People doubt, people question, people are going, why do you believe that? That's not true. So I wanted to prove them wrong and prove that it must be true because that experience that day was real. And I can't them out of that experience. No. So my personal journey that took me down, I need to know the facts. And is this true? Like what you said, was through kind of the experience / the world is rejecting this. Why are you 15, 16? I went to a public school after Cornerstone, reading my King James Bible as a King James onlyist at the time. And I'm reading literally, thou art, O Lord, and I loved the language. And I just read the entire Bible in school. And I did better that year because I was really struggling with smoking pot and doing things like that. I did better that year when I was my Christian fundamentalist self and studying. And well, I ended up going in studying apologetics, got all the Christian apologists you guys have debated over the years. And I would have totally disliked you guys for not seeing their way of thinking. And then I went to college for 2 years. I'm going to be a minister because a pastor misquoted the passage. And it just is like, how does he know that off the top of his head? I know this. Maybe I'm called. And I relapsed. Addiction. Wrapping up the story to say, I wanted to know the truth. And Myth Vision was born from curiosity. And then I met you guys. I met all these other people. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, well, not all of it is. And when we say true, historical, accurate, precise. And I learned, whoa, once you let the cat out, this is a whole different world. So let's talk about scholarship and just say, you went from ascetic monk, totally said something that bit you in the butt by the Pope, to really taking it to a different career. And you're really well known. And James was saying before you came here, he says, there's no one as widely... What was the word you used, Jay?
Well, the best known brother of ancient Christianity in the world, probably. Bart Ehrman is well known through YouTube and all that, but this goes back more. So, Derek, you're talking about how great we are. And we are. I want to say to you, I've gotten to know you well in the last 3 years. You on YouTube have pioneered something that has never existed before. I couldn't name the 20, 30, 40, 50 scholars. You have their books in your office. My books are right there. You put them up for the camera. To bring to the public academic scholars to talk about topics, and we both appreciate it. You know, we publish our books, but YouTube and the media now are out there. I also want to add, before you go to doctrine, I don't want to give the impression that my quest was just like, let me find out the facts. That was part of it. The other part is, I'm 17, Abilene Christian College, studying Greek. I need to get baptized again. I was only 10. I really didn't understand. Now I want to really, turn my life over to God and Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
It wasn't the Billy Graham revival. It was just me. And so I was baptized again. February 17th, 1963. At Will. Never forget the day. And I said, I'm not joining a church. I'm not joining a religion. I am following the God of Israel, the Creator, and His Son, Jesus Christ.
Okay.
So I just want you to know that that was there. And then it's like, well, what's true?
Yeah. So it's still
What's true and all came later as I began to meet these great professors. And I took a course with Abraham Malherbe. It's called the Synoptic Gospels. That was it. Gospel parallels, Matthew's editing, Mark, and they just taught it just like a great, this is Abilene Christian, but he wasn't trying to destroy the faith. So this will strengthen your faith. Look how interesting this is. And I was hooked for a wife, and I still am.
So that's a great segue to you, because we know, I guess the camera will not see the experiences you're having, the devout, I'm still a faithful and I love God kind of man. So you leave the church, you might, I don't know, did you struggle with betrayal?
Could I hold that for a second?
Sure.
While I left, and I have the official rescript, was the monastery.
Yeah, not
Not the church.
Now, if you say, do you obey the Pope? Most of the time, no. I think the popes very often get it right about violence outside the church. They do not get it right about violence inside the church. And I think that should be get at whole. Justice should be get at whole for women, for example. So, but leaving that aside, I think the fixation on sex rather than violence within the church has been a major mistake. So, but my sensibility is absolutely Catholic. The sacramental sensibility that the Catholic has, in terms of image, and not only a Catholic, I don't mean that, but that you get from being Catholic, it absolutely part of my sensibility. My opinions to the Pope, I have found in general, they're wrong most of the time. Now, every now and then, and on some important things, I've not been cynical, like, as I said, atomic war and things like that. Yeah, they're right. They are right and about the world, but I wanted within justice inside and outside the church. I didn't experience it inside the church. Now, I should say this. My order defended me absolutely against Cardinal Archbishop of Chicago. Orders, Roman Catholic religious orders tend to defend their own, like families. It's usually the hierarchy, the Vatican, that has the problem, okay? But in any case, I left in, what would it be? It would be June of 60, I have to think, June of 95. No, I'm getting mixed up completely. I'm sorry. June of 69. June of 69.
95 and 65 is a big difference.
Yeah. I tend to mix up the, okay. Now, I had been teaching, okay. When I was ordained, this was in 57. I was ordained in 57. My order said, look, you're Irish. You're the first Irish guy getting a doctorate. We're going to send you back to Ireland to get your doctorate. Fine. I was like in the army, you do what you're told. You have 5 years of Greek, 5 years of Latin, you're getting a doctorate. Not my decision. Their decision. Fine.
Oh, that's interesting.
After you're finished that, well, we're going to send you to Rome, to the Biblical Institute, for 2 more years to specialize in exegesis. Sure, whatever. I mean, I loved it. I mean, who would now be in Rome from 59 to 61? Then later they sent me to 2 years to Jerusalem to the École Biblique, the French School of Archaeology. That would be Oh, the years are pretty important. 65 to 67. You mentioned the war. I was in, of course, as you know, with the old city right outside the Damascus Gate, between Damascus and Mandelbaum Gate, Sudo Gate. And we were allowed to double cross Mandelbaum backwards and forwards because we were clergy, special permission. But on the Sunday before the war began, we had been warned, you're on your own. The war is coming. It was that my prophetic insight. It's coming. The UN got all their dependents out to Cyprus and Beirut. Get out, or you're on your own. So on the morning of Sunday, from Jerusalem down to Jericho, that famous road across the Jordan bridges to Amman, because that's the only way you'll get
Across the Allenby Bridge.
across the Allenby Bridge, which we figured the Israelis would take out the first strike. So over to Amman and through to Rome, just with my briefcase. We had to leave everything else to be sent on afterwards. I arrived at the door at Rome without any permissions from anyone. You know, you don't leave your monastery and appear at the headquarters in Rome. Good morning, I'm here. Wow. But of course, the war started the next day. I shouldn't say thank God, but it would be embarrassing if it didn't. But yeah, so I got out of there. Now,
And that's the 6-day war.
the 6-day war. I got out on the Sunday before it started. My dates. It was June the 4th, I think I got out. June the 5th it started. So
June the 6th, they got to the Jerusalem.
they took out the Egyptian Air Force on the morning. So the war was over, not in 6 days, but in 2 hours. The whole Egyptian Air Force was lined up. But with the Egyptian Air Force gone, the Syrian tanks had no air support. So basically it was mopping up, to be honest with you, after that. Anyway, I was gone. Now, I was back in the States again to teach. This would be 67. 67 to 69. I teach something. I'm back in the seminary. What do I want to teach? I kind of like those parables, you know. They kind of go along with my sensibility towards story and everything else. So I picked up Jeremiah.
Yeah.
And I started teaching. Now, I wasn't really thinking of the historical Jesus. I really wasn't. I have my syllabus, so I know. I was teaching the parables of Jesus. And then I started in 69. After I left the monastery, I went to teach immediately at DePaul University.
Yeah.
Which, I didn't suffer. I really didn't. I could have. But what I really wanted was to stop being a priest and a monk, but keep being a biblical scholar. That was the
That was 69.
That was 60.
I was just a bit behind you.
Yeah, we were almost tracking the same.
And we were at Chicago together for a decade.
Right. I might come back to that again. So I'm teaching the parables of Jesus now in 69, and McCormick Theological Seminary was still next to DePaul University. They didn't have a New Testament person teaching. They're in between in 69, maybe to 71. I was teaching also by permission of DePaul at McCormick. So parables. Now, my first book was called In Parables. That book came out in 73. But Perrin at the University of Chicago, I'd seen Manchester, right? Okay, I want to go back to you on that. So Perrin, Becker, and Tracy had a seminar. And they invited me to come down and sit in with them. So the four of us would discuss parables, because Becker was fascinated. He said, parables change things. And I used to poke him a little bit. Well, if parables change, what invents things to begin with? And he was very reluctant to say, well, parables could invent things. No, parables change. So Jesus was changing. I thought, was it Tracy? It was Tracy or Kerr.
He wrote Blessed Rage for Order sometime.
That was Tracy.
Yeah.
Blessed Rage for Order. For Kerr came, I think, 6 months, Sorbonne, and maybe the Sorbonne, but somewhere in France, and Chicago. So he was there for this. Could you imagine the high-powered seminar that was?
Oh,
For me to
I just missed it.
I was just starting. It must have been maybe 71, 72. I had the manuscript.
And I came in 72.
And Perrin called me up after I wrote an article in 71 or 72 called Parable and Example in the Teaching of Jesus, New Testament Studies. He called me up, and in effect he said, who the hell are you? Where did you come from? You know, I hadn't come up to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Chicago when you were.
Yeah, all right.
I came up to the Catholic system, as I just said. And he said, where did you come from?
Was he saying that in a way like he liked it?
No, positive. It's like, where did you get this wisdom?
He said, I just read Parable's example and I gave it to my students, my own seminar. I said, tear this apart. They said, we think Crossan might be right. That there's parables, I'm using parables, where there's the challenge. And the example story would be simply when Luke says, go and do likewise. That's an example story. But wait a minute, this was my insight. If the parable is walking down and the Jew is in the ditch, how do I as a Jew do likewise? Do I dress up as a Samaritan and look for a Jew in the ditch? How do I? This doesn't make any sense. If it's an example, it should be a Jew going down the road and finding a Samaritan in the ditch. And you're telling your fellow Jews, if you see your enemy, your ethnic enemy in the ditch, help him. Okay, that's a good example story.
Right.
But why did he put the Samaritan? That's a provocation. That's a provocation. How do you know that Samaritans are all bad and Jews are all good, and priests and Levites are good? Maybe what if they flipped? So that was my basic intuition. And that's what parable as example was about. And that's what Perrin was impressed by. Because it was part, in a way, of the transformative vision of Jesus. So he invited me down to that, sat me down with the four of them. I was terribly embarrassed. Yeah, he didn't ask me to sit with the students. He said, no, we let you up here. And all the students were saying, well, look, we love your parable stuff, but this historic, we don't know anything about the historical Jesus. This was 69.
Yeah.
Now, Karen was just starting saying, we do know about this historical Jesus and Kaiserman in Germany. So all of a sudden, the students are still, we don't know anything about the Jesus, because they were inoculated with Bultmann saying it's about the consciousness of Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know anything about the consciousness of Jesus. I don't even know my own consciousness. I prefer other people to tell me what I'm doing. So I would not talk about the consciousness of Jesus. I was talking about what Jesus said and did. Then we figure out what he's up to. Sorry, that's not. So anyway, I'm down in Chicago then.
Yeah. And I got there in 72, and I took Jonathan Z. Smith, the great historian of religions, Robert Grant, a great church historian, and Norman Perrin, the New Testament scholar. Now, this is this little kid, Jimmy, who that Greek and Hebrew and my languages were pretty good. So that helped. But Perrin, we called him Mr. Mark in the hallways. Mr. Mark's coming, because all he did was teach Mark. And he did over and over, Mark. He had that students, all over the place down at Rice University and so forth. And that boy, I'd never had this experience. I would sit in class and he had this British accent. He had this wonderful, I got to know him personally. I lived in Park Forest, Illinois. That's a south suburb. Norman Perrin lived in Park Forest, Illinois. And we lived in the same little area in his condos, a bunch of condos around. And he said, they call me James then, James, do you drive in every day? I said, yes, I do. He said, why don't we ride together? You drive. He said, I like to read or think. I'm not a good driver in my life. I want to take the train. And I said, I would love that. So we had, I don't know, hundreds of years, over 5-6 years. And he died Thanksgiving Day, 1976. Yeah. And he just finished his intro to the New Testament. He's so funny. He said, James, I finished it. I turned it in. It's done. Very famous book that was before Bart Ehrman. That was sort of the book. And he said, I got in bed with a bottle of whiskey and I looked at this bedpost and that bedpost. And when I couldn't tell the difference, I went to sleep. I celebrated my book because he worked so hard on it. And, but I took Mark from him and I still, some of that.
That's the best course.
Mark is setting up just the 5 or 6 parts of his way of talking about Mark. It just changed everything for me. Now, It didn't answer the historical question, but I'll tell you what I always remember him saying. Somebody asked him in class, Dr. Perrin, now you seem to admire the Jesus character and Mark and so forth. What would disenfranchise you if we could prove it? Not like Jesus didn't exist, but what would make you think, nah, not the guy to follow? And I'll never forget it. I wish I could do his accent. He said, if he were drugged to the cross, kicking and screaming and cursing his enemies, I don't think I could. I wouldn't be interested in the mythology. But I actually am taking a leap here, and I don't think he did that. Okay. And that moved me. Now, I got to tell you a funny story. This is so funny. We had to all go to the toilet in the men's room at Swift Hall. That's yeah, you've been there many times. So we're staying. So one time, Norman Perrin and I were side by side. And he goes, men talking while they pee. James, during the war once, I stood next to Winston Churchill. And I thought, is the point of this like the great and the small pee together? Yeah. That's all he said. Yeah. He said, this is a funny thing we men do. The women go and get stalls. Usually we don't talk. Yeah, we're men, we know. But sometimes say something to someone you're with. Maybe if you just came out of class, that was a really good point. I'll never forget that. He peed by Winston Churchill. I peed by Norman Perrin.
Precariously, you got with Churchill. I think he told all my students that, and they love that story. They're like,
yeah, he didn't need to tell you the meaning of that. I think you got it, James.
So historically, with you now both deeply driven by an academic pursuit, though it may have other, there's probably other reasons behind the pursuit, but discovering and finding out the cool stuff about these texts and how they anchor themselves to history or how they don't, how to understand a parable. What is it now? You're famous for that. Many people talk about those parables. They love your interpretation of understanding Mark as kind of a parable at large, even in a sense. That doesn't mean there isn't history, which leads me to my next question. I've been known as the myth guy, right? I mean, it's kind of the name of my channel. Okay, metaphysical. What do I mean? I like to find fiction and go, I don't think that happened. I think they invented that. I think that's fanciful.
The Jonah story, maybe.
Jonah story or virgin birth, right? I take that as a legendary trope, right? Things like this. Now, I know that the Catholics may not like that, but I'm just being honest here, okay? And so I looked at the myth, and for a while, interviewing Robert Price and Richard Carrier, I was a mythicist. I believe Jesus didn't exist. Look at this. He didn't walk on water. He didn't float up into a cloud. He wasn't born of a virgin. He didn't grill and multiply 5,000, and the list goes on and on, right? Yeah. Because it's easy when you don't really go ahead and just start reading all there is, and it's taken me years now to finally go, actually, there's something there. For me, it makes more sense. It seems obvious that they mythologized this character, this charismatic character. But who is he?
Yeah.
What did he do? What did he say? And if there's anyone in this room that would be able to tell us a little bit about the Jesus seminar, it would be John Dr. Crossan. So, Dom, you sat in these rooms with people voting, experts, some of the sharpest minds out there. You had much to say about the historical Jesus when we were driving down the roads in here going, oh my gosh, that is where the gospel places this.
I took him on a tour of the Holy Land.
Yeah, we went
called Tracking Jesus.
Or not traffic. Yes. And it's really just different when you're there and you're thinking about it. You're going, whoa, what if he was right here? The interpretation changes. Like, you're there, you're seeing the Temple of Pan in Caesarea Philippi, I believe it is, Caesarea Philippi, and we're right there, you see the tunnel to the underworld. This is Hades' entrance. Pan's here, there's a temple to Herod built for Caesar, and I'm sitting here going, and Jesus is standing in this area going, who do men say that I am?
Okay, now, let me begin.
Are we okay on time?
Yeah, we're doing that.
So you're watching, because I don't want us to talk and...
You get where I'm going with this, son.
All right. I'm very careful with language.
Yep.
I don't use myth when I mean parable. Don't mean parable when I mean fable. Let me give an example rather than talk bragging. Okay, somebody said, Jesus walks on water, he didn't. Now, when in doubt, read the text. The text does not say Jesus walked on water. The text says, it's a story. Jesus sends the guys out by themselves in the boat. He doesn't go with them, he sends them out. They're getting nowhere, they're rowing like mad and getting nowhere, right? Along comes Jesus walking on the waters. He's going to pass them by, not coming on to help them. They have to cry out for him. Then he gets into the boat and they're there for they want to land. Now, when I read that, I don't think he walked. Of course, I don't think he walked on water or anyone else. And by the way, I don't give a hoot if he did. Big deal. If you could prove to me tomorrow he walked on water, I would want to say, if I'm a Christian, does that mean I can do it? No. Well, I don't care. So he could do it. Good for him. But I read the text and the message I get, keep Jesus in the boat. Because if he ain't in the boat, you're going nowhere.
Got it.
No. Wow. They knew that already by the year 70? That the boat could take off without Jesus? I thought we only invented that, some years ago. They're already aware that Jesus has given them this parabolic warning. I sent you out without me. How did you do? You rowed all night and you got nowhere. And you had to call me to get back in the boat. And if you don't call, I'm just...
So that's the meaning of the story.
That's a parable for me.
Got it.
And I see, well, what does that mean? And that's what I just said. Now, if all is said and there was Jesus could walk on water, I would want to know, why did it pick on that? Those people believed Jesus could do whatever he wanted.
Right.
So it's very important for me that what he's doing mostly is healing. If he's in a debate with a Pharisee, why doesn't he say, I'm going to raise you 10 feet off the ground. Do you still want to continue?
You're right. Exactly.
20 feet. And I'm going to turn you upside down. Would you want to continue? Jesus doesn't do that.
That'd be a cool story, though.
Remember in Jesus Christ Superstar, The Wrong View, can you walk across my swimming pool? Herod Antipas asked, remember? That would be the, oh, you're a great miss. Here's my pool, making fun of it, but I love that. Can you walk across my swimming pool?
Yeah. And that's the typical temptation. I mean, in case we have any doubt about this, you have the temptations up front to tell you what he obviously can do,
right,
but won't do. I mean, you can clearly turn the stones in the loaf, but he doesn't do it. He won't show off. So if you take seriously both their belief that Jesus could do whatever he wants, then watch what he does do and doesn't do.
That's really important.
So that's really what's important. No, I don't think for a second. Mary was, I'm very careful in my language. We're talking about virginal conception, by the way, of Giles.
Like virgin birth. It's how is real.
On birth is a Catholic thing, and immaculate conception is something totally different. Sorry, I beg it, but
don't gesture, Dominic, and not the camera. My students all get it confused.
Oh yeah, immaculate conception has to do with original sin. Leave that out. Virginal birth means, as Thomas Aquinas says, it's like the light coming through the windows of a cathedral. It doesn't break the hymen in plain language. Virginal conception. Now, what is it? Why would you make a claim like that? Let's believe we're living in a world where wonderful things happen. We are. First century, wonderful things happen all over the place. So why would you come up with this today? What's the claim about? Well, extraordinary children in the Jewish tradition are born of aged, infertile parents. By the way, that's a heck of a miracle.
Yeah.
You see a 90-year-old clinically, forensically shown giving birth. Whew, that's a real miracle.
Right.
So that's what they do in the Jewish tradition. In the Roman tradition, a god or a goddess comes down, and they do it. Now, how do I beat them? How do I say, my guy Jesus beats your guy and your guy? A virginal conception. God just says, let it be. And by the way, Mary gets to say yes. The woman never gets to say yes.
May the Lord do to me.
Yeah, she said yes, so it's not rape.
Right. You did right, Aaron. That's actually a unique.
Yeah.
Okay. It's immortalized.
But the point is that I'm trying to say my Jesus, this is a claim, is better than your Caesar, who comes from Apollo, Or you're whoever you want to sing over here, Samson or
Sarah.
Sarah. Yeah, anyone. We beat you. Now, that's a claim. It's a metaphor. I don't believe it happened for a second. I am not even certain they took it. I don't know how to figure that out.
Right. And I believe the author lean here.
I don't know whether half the people in this country, among whom I live happily, who have decided maybe that Biden stole the election when they claim it. I don't know. Are they being sort of true? Did they want to say that's a fact that we believe it? Or is this just a way of saying we're against you?
Right.
I don't know. And
even the phrase, and the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and that which is conceived will be holy. Yeah, of the Holy Spirit, by the Holy Spirit. That's agency somehow. That's not really clinically, biologically discussing anything. But this child is going to be of the Holy Spirit.
Any other child around. Now that's a boy. That is a claim. And if I said, literally, I don't believe in the virgin of conception, what I really am saying is I don't believe Jesus is that important. He's no better than Caesar. He's just one more guy. So if I say, I would say, by the way, as a Christian, do I believe in the virgin of conception? Yes. Do I think it's literal? Of course not. The only thing I could think of worse than taking it literally is denying it literally.
So this is the interesting thing about it, and you might even make a justifiable case that the original intent was not literal. And this is the interesting point, I think, about the scholarship you guys are doing, because what do? We were taught, like, no, it says that, and in the beginning, God created the heavens in 6 days, damn it, and not a single day longer. That means the earth's 7,000 years. We take this stuff, and it's like, did you really think that they wrote this story and have a serpent talk and all that the author themselves was like a fundamentalist who wrote it? Or do you think that the author was like, hey, this is how you tell a story. This is how you can...
Outdoing Gilgamesh. Well, outdoing Gilgamesh.
Exactly, yeah. And you can meet Livy, who's living under Augustus, and has to write the beginning of this, has to be very careful.
Yes.
He knows the mythology.
Yes.
Now, don't poke Augustus. He's all right, but so he says, well, it's poetry. And what other people deserves poetry more than the Roman people?
Right.
It's not history. Some of this stuff about Virgil with this little kid, Eurus coming out, yeah, we don't push that. But it's poetry. You can see then that tells me Livy knows what the mythology is and knows not to laugh at it. So he gets going. Let's get to history soon. So yeah. Now maybe ordinary people weren't sure.
So we're going to shift here to you for a second there, James, because your lecture series, I'm going to confess this publicly, I've already thought there's a historical Jesus. Now, mind you, I was a mythicist, and it started making more sense there was a guy. But there was a guy doesn't mean much. Okay, what? He was a Jew, killed, likely by crucifixion. Paul seems to say so. Have a nice day. And with your lecture that you just did, Ray, I'm starting to think to myself,
Of course, we just recorded.
yeah, the course of Christianity before Paul, and of course you put Christianity in scare.
Dom's Dark Ages.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
and I'm thinking to myself, by the time he got to the end of that, I was like, okay, hold on, there has to be more here. Like, it can't just be all fantastic. There's something, I think of the dust as an archaeologist sweeps away, and then there's files. There's fossils. There's fossils all throughout this text. Determining what that is takes a skill. And it's scholarship like you guys that helped me kind of get closer to trying to figure out what I think might be. So, historical Jesus studies. Dom was a president. I believe you're the president of the Jesus Seminar for a while, were you not?
Co-chair.
Co-chair. Okay. We'll come back to you for a second, but tell us, who was Jesus? And I want to segue into the dispute amongst academics. This is not a debate. It is a conversation about apocalypticism. And what I'm interested in, once you give the apocalyptic view, is to allow Dom to explain the philosopher, the cynic view that came up, and it rose up as a prominent view amongst Jesus Seminar thinkers, and why that actually makes a lot of sense based on certain data. So can we start with you on apocalypticism, because you're all over this?
I'm sort of Mr. Apocalyptic, at least in my work. I wrote an article called From Qumran, Dead Sea Scrolls, to Waco, David Corus, because I was involved with the FBI and trying to help resolve that peacefully. And unfortunately, we failed. But I blame the FBI. Actually, I wrote a book on it, My Waco. So, now that course that we just recorded is called Christianity Before Paul, in triple quotes. That wouldn't be so much doubting, did he exist, did he not exist? That would actually be trying to track the trajectory of one stream that we know comes out of the movement. So you finally, Constantinian orthodoxy and so forth, East and West, sort of Gnosticizing, Marcionite, evil God sort of structures. And the stream that I was trying to trace, the Pauline stream of the whole Pauline school, not just Paul, or this early letters, I call them 7 early letters. But this movement that would start with Qumranites interpreting Daniel mainly. These are end of the world guys, we call it end of the age. They thought they were living within they'd taken the Maccabean text. It can't fail. Daniel cannot fail. Why? Because it ends in chapter 12 at the final resurrection of the dead. And before that, there's a final evil ruler. That could be Antiochus Epiphanes, but it wasn't him. So now we're moving up.
Right, and down the road.
Yeah, and we're taking that same thing. And Second Esdras says this. I would like to interpret this differently than our brother Daniel.
Right.
Because originally we know those texts applied to the Maccabees. They're Greek. And all of a sudden now it's Pompeii and Rome. So it's moving down. Now Jesus is there. And I do think that the movement, now whether he personally, we might disagree, we might agree.
Right.
But I think the whole matrix of that movement, starting with the teacher of righteousness, 100 years later, John the Baptizer, Jesus, and then James, and the letter of James particularly, even if he didn't write it. Not a lot of Paul on that letter, in terms of distinctive doctrines. But so that's what we're tracing. I think it's interesting. But here's what I feel. I'm mostly a Paul scholar. I've written 2 books on Paul. I did my dissertation on Paul. And I feel a beating heart of Paul. I know there are people, I'm comparing it to the mythesis on Jesus.
Right. Okay.
I feel, and you say, what do you mean you feel? How about reading those 7 letters about 100 times in Greek till I can almost quote them word for word? And I probably could quote them in English, any passage. I used to play a game with my kids. Open any part of the New Testament. Dad's going to know this. Is it Matthew, Mark, or Luke? Well, see, I can do that with Paul. Yeah. My wife said once, she's an English major, James, don't you wish you knew Shakespeare like you know the New Testament? I actually paused and thought, that would be pretty amazing if I could just sprinkle my dialogue day and night with quotes from the plays. And anyway, I didn't do that. I did Jesus and Paul. So I feel Paul. So if I talk to one of the Marcion scholars and they go, oh, he took this out and he took this out. This is real Paul. I know it. I feel I know it's wrong. That stuff was not put in the 2nd century by the Orthodox Church. It's just, and you say, well, you could put rhetoric in like that. Oh, I could argue it, but right now I'm saying I feel the guy.
Yeah, we're just having.
I feel the guy.
You feel that there's a real guy about.
Well, I also feel the Jesus guy.
Okay.
So it's a little more than just the course. It is it's almost like your parable stuff. Is it a conspiracy in the 2nd, 3rd century where someone created this? That's one alternative. So it's a literary product of, I've never understood who did it. Right. From different so-called mythicists. Did they have a committee meeting? Let's create this guy and he'll say this and this. And here's a good story. It's much more powerful and subtle than that. There is a beating heart of a human being within an apocalyptic matrix, but that we're going to talk about is no longer important. Schweitzer was right. Whoever thought that, it all failed. Nothing predicted happened. I'm not a preterist.
Right.
I'm not going to say it happened in 70.
If anything,
Nothing fall happened. The Antichrist did not come, did not sit in the temple. Caligula got close. Didn't happen. If you read Luke, Jerusalem surrounded by armies, the Jews are dispersed, and then you wait, and then there will be signs from heaven. Well, they're still waiting for that.
still waiting.
He puts, until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. That's the biggest until in the Bible. Until. Okay. Now there are no signs. Luke says there are no more signs. Have you ever noticed that? Mark's signs, because he still thinks it might happen. Luke is that was 70 AD. So he's a preterist. But the coming, okay, so leave that aside. It was all wrong. I tell my students, the one enterprise in human history, thought enterprise that has failed 100% is predicting the end of the age and when it would come. I mean, in the definitive way that the Hebrew Bible presents it.
Right.
I don't see peace and justice filling the earth. I don't see Jerusalem as the center. Well, it's Jerusalem above, little Tabor. Okay. But I don't think they thought that. If you're going to sit on 12 thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel, if you're going to write a letter like James to the scattered 12 tribes of Israel, I think they're in their world. It was wrong. So should we just throw it out? Or is there something that emerges? Pass it to Don. But is there something? And I would say yes. Now, is that just a sentimental feeling that a 16-year-old had as a young, naive boy walking the streets of Jerusalem? I don't think so. I've also dug for 33 years major sites, including Cephas, including Jerusalem now. And I find that the stories that emerge collectively out of these documents are quite compelling. They do not read to me like other gospels, so-called apocryphal gospels. They have some value. But, if Jesus is striking dead a couple kids or jumping off the roof to show he could fly, it's exactly what Don just talked about. That's not what I'm saying in these documents. So Mark is a literary production. But what is it really saying?
Right.
And does it reflect the fate of this man, historical Jesus of Nazareth, who ended up crucified and dead? And no witnesses. Nobody I saw him, and the women fled from the tomb because trembling and fear had come upon them. I'm still standing there looking at the dead Jesus, you see?
Yeah.
And what did he just say? What were his last words? My God, why have you forsaken me? Maybe quoting a psalm as he died. I don't know if he did it, but that's where I'm left. And then I go to Matthew, and we're up on a mountain, and it's foggy and misty, and some doubted. Then I go to Luke. Oh, touch, feel. Let me eat a little bit. Well, you're going to go to the toilet after you eat? Let's not think about that. And then John, I got to touch. So you see where it's moving. I'm back there at the cross, and I'm thinking, why did the Romans crucify this guy? Is he just a brigand? Is he Barabbas? I don't know. Maybe Barabbas was wonderful. But parables, it's back to the parables, it's back to the teachings. And later you guys did What Did He Do as well. And E.P. Sanders, I love him saying, what are some of the events? I like that. Yeah. But it's the Q material, as we call it. The material common, Matthew and Luke, that's not in Mark, that I add to that. And then I'm feeling a person there. Gotcha. Is that just a subjective, sentimental idea? I think I could defend it. You want to take it bit by bit? I can defend it. Mary and Martha's story, my favorite. Two women, sisters. One's in the kitchen cooking the biscuits. The other's in class with the rabbi. Can I prove that happened? No. But I think there's enough evidence that Jesus attracted men, women, rich, poor, slave, free, high, low, and did in fact do something that nobody's ever done in history. Maybe certain groups in the Middle Ages tried this kind of, egalitarian thing, but really the powers that be are so strong. And I agree with Dom. I love his book, God and the Empire. And if we're going to bring down the powers of evil, it's going to be basically the same method Jesus used. I really think so.
We'll take it over, Don, because this is really all right.
This is really good. I mean, there's a huge amount of that I really agree with, so I won't repeat it. Let me look at apocalypticism.
Yeah.
Which I'm defining. Now, other people may have a different. Apocalypticism is the delusion.
Yeah.
That's how he has it, Corey common.
But it might be a coping delusion, right? Like,
Okay, maybe a coping, but there's lots of coping delusions.
Right.
But when kids in Belfast come home from school and used to throw stones at British tanks, that's a way of coping, but I'm not just sure it's the future. But anyway, apocalypticism is the belief that God's going to come soon to do it for you.
Magic.
That's my definition.
Yeah.
That's
Big solution.
Now, it's a delusion. I consider that, I better use plural so it's not male or female. Apocalypticists are prophets who have lost their nerve. Now, I've not been cynical or anything. I understand why some people might lose their nerve. We could do it today. Real fast. In the 700s, Syria destroyed the north. In the 600s, Babylon destroyed the south, more or less. In the 500s, the Persians. Gorgeous, we're back. Cyrus is the Messiah. Imagine the euphoria. Must have been like the Berlin Wall.
Zechariah will have the Messiah as
Marvelous. What did he get?
Branch of David, yeah.
The god Alexander.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It didn't work out, did it?
You know,
yeah.
and they got the Syrians and the Egyptians using the Jewish homeland as a battleground for a half dozen wars.
Trampling back and forth, yeah.
You know, I'm a prophet, let me imagine. I give up. I can't read it anymore. Isaiah, Jeremiah, they could look at the evening news and read what God was doing. I can't see it anymore. I give up. God's going to have to do it for me. That's the failure of nerve, and it's dangerously close to a failure of hope and even of faith. It's not what Isaiah said, and I don't think Isaiah or Jeremiah with the Assyrians and the Babylonians are really any worse than Alexander and the Romans. They're just louder or more better organized, or whatever term you want to use, more intrusive, but just as destructive. You die anyway. So I think they lost their nerve. I think the difference, with all due respect, between Jesus and John the Baptist, which means that Jesus had to have a major conversion, bigger than Paul's, was that John the Baptist said, here's what I think John the Baptist was doing. We're going to repeat the return from exile. We're going to go out into the desert. We're going to cross the Jordan into the promised land as we did. And as the waters wash our body, repentance will wash our souls. And then God's going to come. Because what's he waiting for? Repentance. Okay, now that makes absolute sense to me. It tells people there's something we can do, not just wait around and pray and hope and wait. We could do something to maybe push God a little bit, or at least get ready. Now, what happened was, what came? Not God, but Antipas's cavalry, I presume.
Yeah. And
Now, Jesus has a choice. He can pick up the fallen mantle, shall we say, and that's the model, Elijah, Elisha. Pick up the fallen mantle of John the Baptist. Say, well, we just got the time wrong. It's still soon, but right, a little later soon. Jesus could have done that. He could have been the renewed John the Baptist. Instead, the only way I can explain what happened to Jesus is a massive conversion. Oh my God. God didn't come to save John. Couldn't he have moved it up a week or two just to save John? Maybe we got it wrong. Maybe God doesn't work like that. Maybe this whole, my language, this whole apocalyptic dream is wrong. I go back to the prophets. I read what God is doing. God wants our cooperation. Nowhere in Isaiah or Jeremiah or Amos or Micah or any of them do I see them saying, God's going to do it for you. They would have said, it's a covenant, dummy. A covenant is a two-way operation. So I think the great big, I don't want to say betrayal, that's a cruel word, abandonment of being able to understand God and prophecy is, and I understand why it happened. It may happen in this country. It may even be happening right now, that we give up. We can't do anything. President Trump is just too powerful. You cannot oppose. I understand it can happen. So I understand it when Alexander and then the Romans. We thought the phalanxes of Alexander was the most mighty thing we could imagine. Those three. Now we have the Roman broadsword. They're getting worse. Empires are getting stronger. I thought the empire was supposed to be going like this. The rule of God. Empires are going. God's going to have to do it. That is a failure of narrative. I do understand it. I sympathize absolutely with it. But I think it is I'll use the harsher word, a betrayal of the whole biblical tradition. The whole biblical tradition. Back to Genesis 1, when we're made in the image and likeness of God. And to Paul, where we're heirs of God. So, as I understand it, we have to understand apocalypticism, and that includes the book of Revelation, which is not only apocalypticism, but at least the book of Revelation never says, like what's the Left Behind series, that we're going to participate. Right. Nowhere in the book of Revelation does it say the angels are waiting for us to come on. Right. That's a second huge betrayal in the book of Revelation, that we're going to help them. That some of us are going to help them at least. Right. That's a betrayal of Jesus. Now, if you want to say Jesus got it wrong, he came up with this idea of nonviolent revolution. That's all bunk. So let's bring him back again on a war horse and do it right. Let's bring him back to kick butt.
And that is what the apocalypse of
That's what they say. I understand it.
Yeah.
High body count.
I understand it. We understand it all too well, please.
So that I have to know. I'm making sure our audience is picking up what you're putting down here. This is a complex matter. And what you're suggesting is that John the Baptist, you don't think that Jesus would have likely saw what happened to John the Baptist and not have had a moment of rethinking of what had to happen and how it's going to work. And there are different ways that scholars might go down. Like my immediate thought of as an alternative to the one you thought of was, okay, well, maybe it's not that. Maybe, as he says in Matthew, there's like that fossil Schweitzer says, go to the houses of Israel and make sure you get everybody, but you won't even have gone through all that before the Son of Man comes. Then there's this other one in my mind, which is the martyrdom concept, which is like, you know what, maybe we have to die. Maybe that's the message that we will end up becoming sacrifices, so to speak.
But you're jumping away from John too fast.
Well, I'm just giving different notes.
Remember, he was baptized by John.
Right.
That means for that moment when he was under the water, he accepted John's theology.
Of course. Now, he's a disciple of John.
Yeah. Yes, he's a disciple. He's not second in command. And Jesus looks at John as a crowd, the greatest prophet.
Right. He's that prophet like Moses.
That's right. And that's what you do with a revered mentor for me, with whom you now disagree. You say, he's the greatest person that ever lived, but the least in the kingdom of heaven is greater.
Yeah, but so that's one of those passages we wonder if it's been fudged. But there's always a different, possible. I try. But I'm not getting into that.
No.
Your point.
Then let me be quite clear. If somebody wanted to argue with me up on the stage that Jesus never existed, they will win the argument, because everything I can say is part of the conspiracy theory. He would also win with me on the stage if he wanted to deny the Holocaust. Because everything you could say, except in a court of law in England where it didn't work, everything you can say, he was going to say, well, that's part of the plot. You're showing pictures, but they're all fudged. And I think more and more in the future, with AI-generated images,
It's going to be
really impossible, because you can even do it right now. But anyway,
voices even.
but of course, when you ask from a scholar, is a consistent image.
Right.
That's all you can ask. And if it's persuasive to nobody, then I guess all you can do is make your case. Now, I'm making the case that apocalypticism is absolutely understandable as a mistake.
Yeah. And even we've had conversations about this. You and I actually done deep dives privately, and
The revelation we do.
yeah. And Revelation's clearly apocalyptic. That Christians interpreting using that model that they found. But then there's this other idea that Jesus has. It's like used modern current what's happening in America right now. And I kind of want to use that as your point with Jesus, is that you're seeing that people are hopeless in a sense, or helpless. They realize that the powers that be are too much. And maybe Jesus saw that.
That's right.
And said, hey, here's the deal. The magic of him coming out of the heavens and fixing this may not be the case. We've got to cooperate. If that means our lives are taken in the process, it will eventually, hopefully it's like that. It's like, I heard a famous thing, if you don't mind, I'm sorry I'm jumping over to that point. I heard a story. I don't know how true this is, but this back when there were gladiators and there was Christians being persecuted. And there was a Christian leapt the wall, went into the middle to try and help. And I don't remember where the story comes from, but I've heard it before from another Christian. And they ran in the middle of the gladiator. Everyone's cheering for blood. Everyone's kill him. And the Christian gets in the middle, and the gladiator he's saying something like, listen, I love you. Love is the answer. Don't. Peace. Why are we killing and being cruel and harming? And then the guy runs the sword through him. And it was like a moment of the taste for blood that the whole audience had completely dissipated. They all, there was a moment of something that happened there where it was they had to die, but everyone in that audience realized this was not the answer. Almost like your animal sacrifice stuff. It's this is not the answer. The dying, laying my life down.
I'm learning how that applies to Jesus.
So Jesus dies, right? And some scholars think that that's a post-rationalization that they didn't expect him to die, like Bart Ehrman.
Okay, but the both of us accept that Jesus was crucified.
Right. And I'm saying maybe he knew he had to die. I'm dying out.
No, wait a second. Really, because I've written on this. If you read Mark, let's go back to Mark for the moment, as the earliest of the four Gospels. Jesus spends most of his time that week in Mark in Jerusalem trying not to die.
Right.
What he does should get him killed Sunday night. Ooh, Monday night. No, that he should be dead by Monday night at the latest. Why not? Mark says consistently, because every day in the temple, the crowd, the achlas, the events, but the authorities want to get him. Mark, afraid. Now, what does he do at night? It said there's a full moon, so it's nice and bright. He goes out to Bethany.
Yeah. Every morning he comes in over the Mount of Olives.
Comes in every day. That's a guy who's trying to be safe at night with the family.
Right.
Be safe today with the crowd until they get him. And they get him where? In Gethsemane, which is exactly where he's halfway between his safety with the crowd in the temple and safety with the family, James and probably John and Lazarus. So everything in that story makes sense to me of a guy who is
not wanting to.
Coming to Jerusalem to make a demonstration, like Martin Luther King went, knowing he could die. Of course he knew it.
Right.
How should John the Baptist had, but not wanting. I think he was invited, actually, this is reconstruction. I think they said to him something like, look, Jesus, would you get out of those hick towns in Galilee? If you're serious about this program, this movement, take it to the capital. Take it to Washington. Take it to Jerusalem. And when will you come? Come on July the 4th.
Yeah.
Come at Passover. And we will protect you. Gotcha. How would you do it? Crowd by day that's waiting for you to come. And every night, get out of there. Bethany. All of that, I'm sorry, it makes absolute sense to me. And I don't think Mark knows enough to really fake that whole thing. Yeah, that's part of my problem. When these guys tried to fake even 50 years earlier, they pretty much get kind of woolly. I mean, you get lots of talk about Caesar, but not about Augustus, or about Herod, but not about Antipas. It all starts you kind of disappearing before you. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So anyway.
Okay. Stopping, restarting, or we'll want to have James chime in here, because I know that
James might.
But I know that there's a lot James might want to add to this picture or even discuss. So, James?
Yeah, I have a slightly different view, I'd say. But, I don't go to the bank with it, so to speak. It's a very complex thing. But I wrote an article a few years ago called, let me think what it was called just a second. The Dynamics of Messianic Self-Identity.
Self-what?
The Dynamics of Messianic Self-Identity.
Okay, self-identity.
It's the phenomena that Michael Wise explored in his wonderful book, The First Messiah. Used a lot of my material from Qumran to Waco.
Yeah.
That figures in this period who think they're somebody, almost like, are you the one or should we look for another? And a lot of this turns on whether you think that Jesus identified as the Davidic Messiah. And as you know, scholars, Bart Ehrman would say, no, we don't know if he's the Messiah. Different people have things. And it doesn't bother me that somebody has a Stoic Cynic model that can fit in with the Davidic Messiah. Mm-hmm. But one of the things about that is there's a self-fulfilling nature to that, where you picture the dynamics of reading a text and thinking, that's me. Especially if you have, by a jolt of experience, connected some of the servant hymns. There are 12 altogether, or there are 12 pericopes on the servant in Isaiah 42 through 53. But 4 of them are usually identified as the servant songs. But within those, you have a character, especially in Isaiah 49, who's chosen. But then it gets very first person. Mm-hmm. I was chosen before I was born. I think Paul later he up too. But I think Jesus might have. I was chosen before I was born. Mama told me. I've been told whatever happened at his birth. And my job, you are my servant to regather my servant Israel. But it's corporate. It's definitely corporate. People say, well, Israel's a servant. Yes, Israel's a servant. But there's a remnant idea. And then this figure is told by God, first person, is it a small thing to regather the tribes of Israel? You're also going to become a light to the nations and draw the Gentiles too. And it's sort of like, and I think, I don't know when, but Michael Wise convinced me that in the Thanksgiving hymns, there's a very autobiographical section, 10 through 17, where the teacher, we think, might have written these himself, and he's reflecting on some of the same things. Betrayal and some of the language of the suffering servant appears in Hebrew, at least. You can make a column of some of the words. So when John dies, now this I'm shaky on because it's Mark, but it's only Mark, and Matthew and Luke don't get it. When you come down the Mount of Transfiguration, after saying, you're going to see the kingdom of God come with power, Mark 9. And then the disciple, wait, if we're already there, what about Elijah has to come? Malachi, where's Elijah? Now, Mark's writing this in the mouth of Jesus, I think. Elijah did come, and they did to him what was written of him. Now, that's a real turn. There's nothing in Malachi about Elijah comes and tries to restore things, and behold my messenger, chapter 3, chapter 4. So I began to wonder whether Jesus was so shocked by the brutal death of John that he might have gone back to the drawing board. Not sure, but thinking, if I'm the Isaiah 11 guy, because the Isaiah 11 guy does the same thing that the Isaiah 49 guy does. People say, well, it didn't say he's the Messiah. Isaiah 11 doesn't say he's Messiah. This is the branch of David. It never calls him Messiah. Forget the word Messiah. I mean, it's chosen, anointed, Isaiah 61, anointed by the Spirit. But he thinks, my job is to regather Israel, Judah and Israel back together, 12 tribes, and to become the light to the Gentiles. But John was the priest by my side. You know, I'm the Davidic figure. He's the priestly figure, going back to some of the models, Zechariah 4 and so forth. We were the two anointed before the Lord of the whole earth, and one of them is dead. Should I go, there we go with you, go to Jerusalem, let's see. I don't want to die. Let this cup pass, whatever you want to say. Who wants to die? But thinking, if it took that, it might take that.
Right.
Not think he's going to be raised.
He's trying to not die, but
Now, everyone goes Isaiah 52:13 through 53:10, and okay, you know, he exalts him and so forth. I don't think he thinks, if I die, he's on the cross now. We think he died. And he's not thinking, oh, well, this is all predicted. I'll die, but, you know, I'll be brought back right away. It's not a big problem. Hey, it's a weekend. It's a weekend loss. People go, well, God lost his son. He understands grief. Yeah, he got him back really quick. We always point that out to people.
Yeah,
My son died. You might not have known. My son died. So I had to bury my own son. I didn't get him back. If I lost him Friday and got him back Sunday, it'd be tough, but I could handle it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm never going to see him again, you know,
yeah.
in this world at least, and maybe not the next if there is one. But I wonder if he died in hope, but not the crazy thing that they later put on him. Oh, don't even worry. He'll die and suffer, and on the third day we'll rise and we'll all be happy. Mm-hmm. And what I like about Mark is he doesn't go to the glory hallelujah because he thinks he's ascended. It's actually the verb agero. He's been lifted up. I agree with Robin, Faith Walsh, Miller, some of your buddies, that the earliest view of resurrection was astral. Well, it wasn't astral immortality, astral ascension, glorified. Like Paul said,
corpse and
like Paul said, there's a natural body, flesh and blood. That's not the kingdom. And he might have, but Mark then puts in this whole thing, he's going to come back. Now, Jesus is dying, maybe thinking, maybe I have to die like John. I know who I am. I know who he is. We're going to get the job done, but what does God have planned? And I'm willing to say that he might have died, well, who knows your last thoughts as you die? It's pretty painful. But he is remembered as forgiving his enemies. That's a wonderful thing. I hope he did that. Maybe he didn't. But he did breathe his last. And Mark says, that's the image I want you to have of Jesus, is what Perrin taught me.
Yeah.
Don't tell me about, and then they ran, and then they saw him, and there was just happy days again. No, it's not happy days again. Peter says, the Gospel of Peter, it breaks off right at this point, thank God. Mm-hmm. For 8 days we wept and mourned, the days of unleavened bread. Nobody said that we wept and mourned. I thought you were like touching him and eating with him and hugging him and seeing him. Gospel of Peter that follows Mark says, for 8 days we wept and mourned. And then Peter said, you guys, feast is over. I'm going fishing. Yeah. He didn't have any resurrection faith. I think that's historical. And Jesus does not come back. I happen to think maybe that the tombs in Talpiot, remember there are two, not one, could be the Jesus family tomb. But that doesn't matter. As John says in our film that Simca made, Simca Jacobovici, who cares about bones? Mm-hmm. You know, it's not about bones. We all have bones. And my favorite verse is Revelation 20, and the sea gave up the dead that were in it. You really think? Let's just be frank. We're going to be fish poop if we die at sea.
Here's something.
And we're going to raise that up and do something. It's so ridiculous.
Go back to your tombs. Don't leave your tombs for a moment. Mm-hmm. What do you think would have happened? Now, let's imagine the Talpiot tomb. I think it's very interesting. I don't think it's a real now that said. But for a moment, let's play with it. So supposing Paul found the tomb of Jesus.
He would not care.
Let's be, hold on for a second.
Go ahead.
Supposing he found it, there was a big sign, Jesus' tomb here, you know, in Greek, so there's no problem. I think what would have counted for Paul was whether there was wounds on those bones. I think if Paul had found the body of Jesus, no question about it, and Jesus had clearly died advanced stage of arthritis, say at 60. I'm not sure about how Paul,
Right.
he might have considered him the Messiah, but I don't see all this stuff from Paul about resurrection and everything else. I just don't see it.
No.
For Paul,
He said he's a life-giving spirit, and the bones. But yeah, it would have. That's like kicking and screaming up to the cross. So that doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I do.
Because he has stigmata.
Jerome Murphy O'Connor asked me. He came to Notre Dame, and after I published some of my things on the Talpiot tomb, he was interested. But he said, James, we called him Jerry. He said, in the gossipy society of ancient Jerusalem, if the tomb were known and the claim is that he's raised, people would go and go, what do you mean he's raised? I don't think that was the claim. I think the claim was he's ascended to heaven. Augustus, the funeral. Yeah, I saw him ascend to heaven. There's a new start. This is resurrection faith. Now, is that true? How would I know?
Wow.
But what I do know is nobody singing and clapping at the empty tomb.
yeah.
And I'm glad to keep him there. And I would say, if I'm speculating, and I wrote this in a blog post, I'll send it to you, where I quote Jerry and then I respond. I would say, people say, well, if they knew where the tomb was, they would just go expose. Gary Habermas and Walt's apologists. Forget it. I would sit there like I sit at my father's grave and touch it like I did George Washington's steps.
Yeah.
And go, man, I remember you so well. Not Paul, because he didn't know him, but Peter and all the rest.
Right.
But God has vindicated you, and, he had the faith, and James, the same thing.
Yeah.
I think the tomb would be a special place. Well, then why don't we know about it? What records do we have?
That's the problem.
Do we have things from 50 on through 75 or 80, other than the Gospels, other than Mark, really?
And
So you don't just start telling me, well, there's no record of them ever visiting the tomb. I am stuck with, and you use the Gospel of Peter in your work, and the reason I love Dom's work, I'm going to just switch and then we can end with this, but he tells you his method. No flattery to you, shut your ears. But so many of these Jesus scholars, if you read his main book, the big book, he tells you, I date this here, I date this here, I consider this tab this way, this tab this way. Then I go and I write, the Mediterranean peasant. That's what you have to do. You don't say, as some of my colleagues, I'm not going to name them, this is going to go public, well, I don't think Joseph of Arimathea even existed. Fine, okay, you say that. He was thrown in a ditch, the dogs ate him, whatever. I don't know that. Jonathan Reed didn't know that. Don Crossan does it. But the point is, if you're going to say that, what's your method? Like, if he's Pontius Pilate or Caiaphas, then he existed because we found something or we have claim. So I generally tend to take the basic story of Mark. I don't mean the theological part that he puts in about the predictions and he'll raise. But it fits well with Peter to me that they were grief-stricken.
Yeah.
So the recovery of faith, the sightings, I like to call it sightings of Jesus, were in the Galilee. And that's exactly what's still preserved in John 21. I'm going fishing, Dom. I'm going fishing.
I think I may have told you this. If I was put on that stage and somebody said, none of this, all these people didn't exist, I said, well, I'm having doubts about Augustus.
Yeah.
Straight face. I have all this.
But we have coins, Dom.
But they're obviously faked. This was done by Nero. Yeah. See, Nero was having serious trouble.
Good point. I hadn't thought of
he
it.
decided that I would lead the new Augustus, but then he had to invent Augustus.
That's right.
Because actually, I just keep going.
There's no proof.
But I can make it up as fast.
And also, Varus, those legions that he lost, we've looked in the German forests. We haven't found any legions.
There was no lost legion.
No,
there were no. Varus is supposed to be in Syria.
Honestly, though, I went there to Calcresa, and then you saw them. I saw the stuff in the museum. But okay, they don't know that. So, but that would be good. See, all of this stuff is simply made Nero, or if you want Titus, whoever you want, makes up the whole previous Roman Empire, and they do it straight faced. Because once you start doing that,
There's no limit.
there's no you might still
Did you know Louis Feldman at Yeshiva? You know, he's written all the great work on Josephus.
Who?
Louis Feldman.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes, very much.
Loved him. I did a NEH with him and wrote a wonderful paper that was published in the Journal of, I shouldn't say a wonder. I wrote a paper that he considered wonderful, published in JBL, on the disappearance of Moses and Elijah and so forth, and Josephus. But because he talks about they return to the divinity, that's his way of understanding. And I'll send you the article.
Oh,
I'm proud of it. Very
You
did I
read
send
that
it?
article. That's right. You know, it's very, very important.
You used it, yeah.
Josephus dances along, saying stuff that we don't recognize. And
Not really resurrection. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, Louis, I learned this from him in that seminar that summer. He said, look, Josephus exaggerates, okay. And he inflates numbers. You know, there were 3 million people and this many land. That's not the point. But if he stayed in Migdal and says there was this and this and there was a tower, this generally the framework in many of the things that he says, there's no reason to just throw everything out.
No. Yeah.
You're going to go through those secrets. Well, maybe he really didn't behead John the Baptist, and that was in Mark and made, okay, now we're in La La Land. We can just go through and do what we want. You got to control it a little bit, okay? Doesn't mean it's all
the
there.
banquet, you can actually doubt the banquet scene, because this is a way of
Exactly.
inculpating.
And Josephus,
Somebody assassinated during a banquet. I mean, then
you have the banquet scene. He gives he says it's Machaerus, but he doesn't give the banquet scene. He says it's because he could raise a revolt.
Yeah.
And that fits the Gospels where they're worried about Jesus.
Yeah.
Is this John the Baptist? I thought we got rid of this, and now this guy's doing it. What are we going to do now?
There's actually an interesting scholar, and if we could wrap this episode up, because I want to do a whole other episode. Okay, dive into these weeds with you guys. There's a scholar, Bruce Loudon. He's no longer with us. He died of cancer a few years back. He's a ancient Homeric expert, if you will, but also an ancient Near Eastern. He's a comparative mythology type. I really wish I would have had him around to be able to interview him to dive deep, but he says that banquet scene, he thinks that motif where the daughter or child of a parent can ask for whatever they want and they get that fulfilled wish comes from Ovid's Metamorphosis, that there's a story about the sun god and he had a child, but the child doesn't really know if it's his dad, right? So, and I can't remember the name of the god. It's in Latin, of course, it's Roman. And he approaches his dad. It's the chariot god. It's Apollo, I believe. Apollo. And he's like, look, I don't know if I'm your son. And he's like, no, you are my son. You are my son. Ask me for anything and I'll give you anything. I swear on it, an oath. He can't break it. He's like, okay, well, let me ride your chariot. And then he scorches the earth. You know the myth where he comes in close because he doesn't know how to ride the damn chariot. He scorches the earth and then it's too cold and it's too hot. And then he crashes the chariot and he dies. His son dies and there's like a burial and a tomb and all that. Well, Bruce Loudon thinks that motif of giving them whatever they want with a daughter of Herod comes in, she's demanding like whatever she wants. He promises her whatever. So he thinks, and then he goes to Josephus and he looks at Josephus and he says, now this is his method, right? Look at Josephus. He goes, if we're going to trust an account on probably what is reality and most obvious, is Josephus is accurate.
Yeah.
In terms of these details.
Back now, wait a minute. Josephus is on John the Baptist.
On John the Baptist's death, yes. And he was taken out and killed over here.
Far away from Galilee.
Yeah, that seems obviously common sense why he would do that.
He's across the line from Decapolis.
Right. But he's far from Galilee.
Far from Galilee, far from the constituents of John where they would have uprising would have happened.
Wait a minute. There is also, I've forgotten it that way. There's an historical example, I have it somewhere, of, I think it was a prostitute at a Roman banquet who says to her lover, I've never seen a person executed. Why don't you bring in somebody and execute it? And they are horrified by it. Not the prostitute, but that he would do this during a banquet. Because Philo talks about what do you do if there's somebody due for execution and the big feast? They go, you postpone it, says Philo.
Yeah.
Doing it during a banquet? This is about the nastiest thing that Mark could possibly say about it.
And Luke takes it out. Luke doesn't.
It's too much for
What
them.
Loudon was saying and wrapping that up is just simply, he's like, yeah. And then if you add the point that his daughter, the Greek kind of describes that her dancing is a sexual thing between him and his men watching.
Yeah, daughters.
That is the most vilifying propaganda you can have.
It's awful.
Yeah. So
Anyway.
you guys told us from your youths to why you're in academia. I think we need to get into Mary next, and we need to dive into other material for that.
All right, one last thing. But you see how James and I would say it is utterly correct, but inadequate to say the banquet never happened. Right. Of course it never happened, but that's not the point. The point is, why then did Mark or whoever make it up to vilify Herod? So ask why it's there. If it happened, then you just say, well, he's just telling it. But if it didn't happen, then it becomes hugely important. Why did somebody make it up? Virgin birth or anything?
And that's the fun stuff.
I think there could be a kernel, if you remember why she's upset. Because John might have been publicly saying with audacity, can you believe what's going on up there in Sepphoris? That is Philip's wife. And this guy takes his brother's wife. That is adultery.
Yeah.
And we as a culture must repent of these things. Like people say about Trump.
Yeah.
Can you believe what he's done with these women and you're going to vote for him?
Right.
It could be something like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure of the banquet. Now, I've been to McCarris and seen the floor
So
where it happened.
yeah, but there's a place. Obviously, no.
I agree that it's quite likely historical. And I think that thing attributed to Jesus, that a man cannot divorce his wife and a wife cannot divorce her, it's a rule that must come from Rome. The biggest man-wife divorce, double divorce, is right there.
That's right.
Herodias and Philip. So anyway, sorry, go on.
You're good. Ladies and gentlemen, two amazing individuals diving deep. Let's check them out.
But what kind of Mary? But I want to make sure people keep watching. You said Mary, not quite contrary, and not Mary Magdalene. There's another Mary, a lost Mary, that's the best known, least known woman in history. Could we talk about her?
Let's talk about her next. Sounds good. See you in the next video.